Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wilderness Tour's Shmita Slowdown series. Thanks for joining us. In this series, we're exploring the power of Shmita through live conversations with changemakers in the Jewish world. And Shmita means release, and it's part of a 7-year cycle that folds into Shabbat and Jubilee. And it's when Jewish people are instructed to release debts and those in servitude. And today, some of us interpret it as that opportunity for reflection and slowing down and renewal. And this year, Wilderness Tour is taking an opportunity to reflect on who we are, what we're doing in this world. And also, we're spending this year designing the Center for Earth-Based Judaism with community input. And then after this year, we'll spend 6 slow years building it. And in today's series, I'm talking with Ariel Luckey, who's a change maker and co-founder of Jews On Ohlone Land. And my name is Leora, and I'm the logistics manager at Wilderness Torah. And I just want to remind viewers that you can live stream questions throughout this, and we'll take a look at them and try and get to answering them at the end. So welcome, Ariel. So glad that you're here today. Love to start off with just hearing from you a little bit about who you are, where you're calling from, and yeah, what you do in the world.
Hi, Leo. So great to be here. Thanks for having me and inviting me to this conversation. So my name is Ariel Luckey. I use he and him pronouns, and my people are Ashkenazi Jewish and Irish, Scottish, English, and Dutch European white settlers. I am here on the northern edge of Huchin, unceded Lisjan Ohlone territory in the East Bay. And I'm an organizer with Jews On Ohlone Land, co-founded with Rabbi Dev Noily, and work closely with you in that context. And I'm also the development director at Sogorea Te Land Trust. I'm also a father and an artist and new uncle, which is very exciting to little people, and lots of things. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, thanks for that. So curious to hear about your relationship with Shmita. Could be nothing, could be extensive. What's it like for you?
So I feel like I'm a student of Shmita. I'm learning. I'm still trying to figure out what is this Shmita thing. I think I first actually heard the term 2.5 years ago when we were at the Jaffe conference. That was the first time I had ever even heard of Shmita, and have since been, learning, trying to understand and learn. Definitely Rabbi Dev is a teacher in that regard, and, other folks who are having these kinds of conversations like Wilderness Torah. And I still feel very much like in that process of learning and grappling. And this year, I'm really sitting with this contradiction of how hard I'm working and how busy I am, and also trying to figure out how Shmita can live and move. Like, can I do Shmita in motion as I parent 2 teenagers and work full time, and then have activism projects on the side and all of the things that I'm deeply engaged in my life? How do I make sense of Shmita in the middle of that mix, and kind of balancing, kind of some trying to get clear, I guess, on the things that really are urgent. There's lots of false urgency, right? Yeah. So much just things that aren't, we're all but it's just a made up deadline.
Yeah.
But there are some real urgencies. There are folks on the street who need food. There are melting icebergs. There's things that really, need to be responded to. Not that I have any of that figured out, but I'm, part of so many people working on some of those things, and how to balance that sense of like things have to still happen, um, with this beautiful, expansive invitation of rest and reflection that I'm understanding Shmita is.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think I also know that like the work that you do, that you're so busy doing, is like as an ally and accomplice to Indigenous people. And so like taking a year off of that might feel like really dissonant with your values. And then also we have like the urgency culture of white supremacy. So like how to navigate that and also like ground in our own Jewish ways and our own Jewish culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I feel like, um, well, one of the primary ways I'm understanding Shemitah is through my relationship with Shabbat.
Mm.
And I feel like I have a Shabbat practice in my life, and it's, um, it ebbs and flows. And when I practice Shabbat, when I take Shabbat, it's so good. It's just so good. It makes everything better,
Yeah.
and it feels good, and it makes everything else like just just better, right? And I have a sense that Shemitah could be like that too, right? Like there's like some deep wisdom and insight that is embedded in this teaching. And if we could only get there, but I feel like sometimes it's really hard to make Shabbat happen. Like my kid has a soccer game on a Friday night. Someone's got to take him and, be there to cheer him on or whatever. Like, um, there's so many demands and so many things. And I think about how radical it is in this current context and culture of stopping, slowing down, dropping into our body, dropping into sacred time and place, versus my Google Calendar and Zoom meetings and to-do lists and deadlines and all of the rat race of the system,
Right.
which is where I spend a decent amount of time, like probably way too much time. Um, so the invitation feels really lovely, and I feel like my orientation right now is definitely like understanding Shemitah through kind of the lens of my relationship to Shabbat practice. Um, and it's still kind of open ended and exploring what is this thing?
Yeah.
It's all about.
Yeah. And I think like it's going to be different for every generation, or maybe even every 7 years. There's a different way to serve the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also thinking about like at the beginning of COVID when like so many gears came to a halt,
Right.
and like coyotes came back in San Francisco. Like it's like the thing that's causing the icebergs to melt in part is the fact that we're like in the rat race. And so like sometimes the problem gets solved by us slowing down, but it like, yeah, it's hard. It's definitely hard. Let's see. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on, so we're Jews living in diaspora, you and I and some other folks, and at least for the lineages that you and I are part of, we're not Indigenous to this territory. We're not Ohlone. Neither of us are Indigenous to Turtle Island either. And so just like, how are you thinking about what's it like to, engage with, potentially reclaim these ancestral practices like Shemitah, being Jewish, both of us are white, trying to de-assimilate with and critique whiteness, but also be in right relationship with Indigenous people in this land? I know it's a big question, but just curious.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's great. Couple different thoughts. My disclaimer is that it's all in progress, and I don't hold me to anything. I'm just thinking out loud. But one of the things I appreciate about the invitation of Shmita is kind of like a expanding, an expansive time frame
Mm,
that gets us into a bigger cycle of life, really. Because 7 years is a significant chunk of time, let alone the like 49 to 50 years of Jubilee and Yovel and all of that. That's a real different than the deadline in the meeting next Tuesday. So that invitation um, feels really resonant, and I feel like the our co-director at Sogorea Te Land Trust, Karina Gould, is also the tribal spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lisjan, and this is her ancestral homeland. She and her family and her tribe have had an unbroken relationship to this place for literally thousands of years. And every time I contemplate and just try to just begin to wrap my head around what it might mean to have a relationship with a piece of land that is thousands of years old, that does something to my sense of time and
mm,
scale. And I hear Karina talking a lot about seven generations, right? As this like indigenous concept, and she actually was she was a guest speaker at the Kahila Community Synagogue's high holidays this last year for Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Dev Noily invited her to speak and invited her to speak a bit about Shemitah and the connection, and she connected the number seven. And we we love the like magic numbers, right? Like the seven generations, that is part of how she understands her life and her work with our cycles of seven, the seventh day of Shabbat, and the seventh year of Shemitah.
mm,
And both of those, I feel like both of those resonate with an expansive sense of time, and like an invitation to locate ourselves, get out of our like day-to-day trips, our cycles and our little like self-importance and our ego, and really understand ourselves in a lineage of ancestry,
mm,
and deeper connection to the cycles of the earth, and just a bigger picture. And so that feels really helpful for me as a Jew, kind of circling back to your question, living on Lisjan land, trying to get inspiration and information from our heritage, and also figure out how to learn about and honor the indigenous teachings of this place and the indigenous people of this place, and like recognize my role as a settler and a guest, and trying to grapple with what that means, and how to live here with integrity. It's really helpful to have that framework of Shemitah to draw on. And I also recognize that it's like instructions that were given for a place that is not this place.
mm,
And so there has to be some translation. And this kind of reminds me, so, we do these Havdalahs at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and you and I have been at many of them together. And the West Berkeley Shell Mound is a really important sacred site for Lisjan Ohlone people. It's right down in Berkeley on 4th Street in University, right on the edge where Strawberry Creek runs into the bay. And, a shell mound is a large, large mound. I think it was originally like 40 something feet tall and like super big, built by generations of shells, because that was a major food source for Ohlone people. And dirt and plants and everything, but it was also a burial site. It was a cemetery. Super sacred site, really, really important in the whole constellation of the East Bay. And it's been under threat of development and desecration. And Karina Gould and the Confederated Villages of Lisjan and a wide coalition of people have been organizing to protect that place. And Karina put out an invitation for everyone to go down to the West Berkeley Shell Mound safely in COVID and, you know, all the things on our own and pray basically in our own way, to bring our prayers and our love and our light to support this work. And so Jews on Ohlone Land, we've been doing these Havdalah rituals on a Saturday evening, and we've done, you know, I don't know, something like 25 of them now over the last like 9 months. And Rabbi Dev was talking the other day about how, you know, we're not just importing our Havdalah ritual and doing it like we're doing it anywhere. And this is this interesting like dynamic of diaspora, right? The Jews have been doing this all over the world for thousands of, you know, literally thousands of years, figuring out this interplay between the things that we're bringing with us. We got our Torah and our rituals and our holidays and, you know, the things, with the culture, the land, the people where we are. And in Jews on Ohlone Land, we are working on, you know, exploring things like, how does Havdalah change when it's at an Ohlone sacred site? What is it about this sacred place that is also in turn shaping the way we light our candle and have our, you know, spices and sing our prayers, that there's a relationship there. We're not just anywhere, we're here. And I feel like there's a similar translation with Shmita, right? Shmita was like these instructions for a particular time and place, and there's wisdom there. There's good stuff in there, and it should probably be applied or practiced in a way that is also weaving with who we are now, where we are now. And, you know, for me, that means part of that is, here we're practicing Shmita, which is land-based instruction on stolen, occupied, desecrated, and still very, very sacred Lisjan Ohlone land. So what does that look like?
Yeah, wow. I appreciate all of those threads. And like, I know that some Indigenous cultures have like the concept of original instructions, like guidelines their creator gave them for being in right relationship with the ecosystems where they live. And I think some Jewish, there might be some parallel, something similar about Shmita that was like developed over many generations of observation and relationship with a particular piece of land. And it's also based on an agricultural system, and not all of California has agriculture. So I think there's like a lot of like, what's the essence of it? And then where's our like humility and porousness and openness to learning from people who have their own original instructions that are specific to this ecosystem. And then also, like you said, acknowledging the power dynamics and the harm in settler colonialism, and the repair, the teshuva that needs to be done with the land and the people. And and I liked your call at the beginning of like, it's a process. Like there's not like ever going to be a book of like, this is how you be a Jew in diaspora. Like it's evolving. So I want to ask you a specific question about the evolution that Wilderness Torah is going through, just to like get your thoughts on it. So Wilderness Torah has been around for, I think, 14 years and has kind of had this like wandering vibe to it, like doing different festivals in different locations. And we're cultivating this relationship with Camp Newman and the Onisati's land that Camp Newman is on, with the idea of building the Center for Earth-Based Judaism, which was kind of like one of the founding concepts of Wilderness Torah. And so we're like, I just really hear the Jewish trope of like being a wandering people in the desert and then like finding a home, like a process that Wilderness Torah is going through. And like I said in the beginning, we're spending this year like getting input from community about like what actually makes this a home, like an inclusive home for Jews and the broader community. And after that year of like reflection and gathering ideas, the idea is to build the Center for Earth-Based Judaism slowly over 6 years and have community input and build relations. And just thinking about, all these things that you mentioned about the processes that we're going through to be in right relationship as Jews in diaspora with our own lineage, this land, the Indigenous people. Like, do you have any ideas, either specifically for that project or just like Jews in general who are curious about like being, like learning more about the work of being in right relationship with land and Indigenous people?
Ooh, so much in there. That's great. What a big, important question. Where to begin? Well, I guess to start to say that I really believe that we can't be free as Jewish people unless everyone is free. That our liberation is completely and deeply and profoundly interwoven. So there's that and the implications of that. And this complicated thing, let me share a little story of my own family history because I think it kind of maybe illustrates this. So my great-great-grandfather, Hyman Kavelovich, grew up in a shtetl in what was Imperial Russia and is now Belarus, and it's a village called Lupsha. And when he was 11 years old, there was a pogrom there because there were waves of pogroms, massive mob violence sweeping across Eastern Europe. And so he saw part of his town, burned and destroyed. I'm sure he knew people who were murdered, maybe in front of his eyes. I don't know. We don't know the details, right? When he was 19, he left. Like many, many people, this was like 1889. And he went to New York because so many Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, were fleeing Eastern Europe at that time because the poverty and the violence and the persecution was so intense. Got to New York City. He worked in a sweatshop, ironing for a while. He met a woman and fell in love, Fanny Cohen. They got married. But because he had terrible asthma, they moved west. And he ended up in LA. And they started a tiny little used clothing shop and worked hard and saved. And then eventually were able to buy a piece of land. This is like the American dream story. And what we know about what the land that they bought is that it was from a Mexican couple and a crumbling adobe house, and that they needed money quickly. And so they gave him a good deal. I'll come back to that in a second. He was then able to leverage that piece of property. He was able to become a citizen of the United States in LA. He became a property owner. There was a big oil industry boom in LA, and the city was growing, and the city expanded to include the land that he had just bought, and it increased in value. And that was the beginning of my family's kind of like financial and political and economic stability in this country. And there's lots of versions of that story. That happens to be one of mine. And, he was dirt poor. He was a refugee, a political refugee with nothing, fleeing awful circumstances. And I think there is a tendency sometimes in the Jewish community to focus on that victimized aspect of his experience. And it was, I've just learned a little bit about the stuff that he went through. And it's harrowing, it's just like, it's so intense. And I think there is less of a tendency to be totally honest about what he arrived and joined in the United States. Once he stepped off that boat, he joined a settler colonial empire project of the United States nation. He joined a white supremacist society and a capitalist society because he was light-skinned and because he was from Eastern Europe. He immediately got a bunch of privileges, and some of them happened to him immediately. Some of them took a generation or two to kick in. And we don't know the story of that Mexican family, but they might have been Tongva. Because we know that for a lot of California Indians, it was actually safer at that time to pass as Mexican than it was to be publicly visible as Native. And so, but regardless of who that particular family was, we know that whole area was part of the legacy of the missions and the gold rush and stolen and, you know, a site of genocide and a site of land theft and everything else. So he was able to benefit from all of those things. All of which to say, I think there's this tension about what is our role. And the first place I go is that we have to be totally, totally honest. We have to, you know, Rabbi Dev talks about emet and truth. We have to really look honestly at the full history of the land that we are on and the story of the colonization of that land, the story of the indigenous people and their resistance and resilience and where they are now and what they need now. And so in that honesty, in that like brutal and heartbreaking honest place, then we can be like, you know, is it okay if we're even here? Is that, I don't take that for granted, right? Why is that granted? It's all political history that brought us and allowed us to be here in this way at this time. Land ownership is a made up system from our society. So why are we able to even be here? And if we are able to be here, what does this history compel us to do? Both our own personal family histories that we're bringing with us, the histories of our peoples, and also the history of the land where we are. What is, like you said before, teshuvah, what is the appropriate repair and healing that this land and the people who are of this land and who are still here fighting for their survival and their safety need? And how can we participate in that? What is our role in all of that? And so that's a big, you know, that's obviously a big question. There's lots of opinions and perspectives and all kinds of things. But for me, whether you're like renting an apartment in downtown Oakland or you own 300 acres in Sonoma County, these are relevant questions. And of course, there's nuances and distinctions and complexities. But I think these are some of the things that our society as a whole and us as individuals and in collectives and organizations need to be grappling with. What can we do to really participate, take responsibility for the privileges and, you know, and our position, really participate in healing and liberation.
Yeah.
So when I think about Wilderness Torah and the Center for Earth-Based Judaism, you know, it's super exciting. I love the idea of like the wandering tribe coming to a home, and that land has already been a home to someone else for a long time. And where are they? And what's the relationship? And, you know, how do we all make sense to that? I don't think there's a right or simple or easy answer, but I definitely think those are the questions that should be on the table.
Yeah, thank you so much for that complexity, honoring the complexity. And I think I'll just also throw in that for folks who do live in Huichin, which colonially is known as the East Bay, we both encourage you to pay Shumi. Check that out. Go to sogoreate.com. That's like a very material, tangible, put your money where your mouth is way to show up for Indigenous people. And also, if you are Jewish and want to be more involved, I would say check out Jews On Ohlone Land, because that's where we both organize, and we're both really excited about activating the Jewish community in this important way and having these complex dialogues. Thanks so much, Ariel, for joining for this chat. I'm sure we could have talked forever because we do talk about this all the time. Another reason to join Jewel to have these conversations. And so I mentioned Sogorea Te, Jews On Ohlone Land, to check out your work and the work that we do. Also, if you want to be a part of this dialogue about the Center for Earth-Based Judaism and other Wilderness Torah work, you can go to wildernesstorah.org. And we're having our first in-person community design charrette for the the Center for Earth-Based Judaism on February 20th. And folks can fill out an interest form. We want to hear all the different voices in the Jewish community and beyond. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have another episode of the Shmita Slowdown series. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Leah.
Dear